Today is March 6th, 2023, and this is the 31st episode and 22nd episode of Season 2 of the Sports Daily CBB podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowles, and today I'm joined by Mike Kumar. A couple days early this week. There's a lot to talk about. This episode is presented by the Sports Daily Media Network, your one-stop shop for all things sports. Be sure to check out the content on the website, sportsdailymedianetwork.com. Got a couple different people posting there now. And on our many Instagram accounts. We'll go over the past weekend's action, a couple of the storylines, off the court, on the court, and then we'll start to talk about our picks for conference teams of the year, and then we'll briefly introduce the conference tournament. So, Mike, we always start with you for Team of the Week. Change it a little bit to Team of the Weekend because, we talked last Wednesday, but a couple teams had good weekends. So who you got?
Thanks, Sean. I got my team of the weekend. It's got to be the Texas A&M Fighting Aggies. This year, they had some expectations coming into the season. They struggled early on in their out of conference, which was very unimpressive, but really took charge coming down the stretch. They've won 9 of their last 10 games and then solidified their place in the tournament with a decisive 67-61 win over Alabama. The game ended up only being decided by 6 points, but A&M really dominated this game from start to finish. Um, Taylor had 28 points in this one and Radford 21. It really just seems like A&M's getting hot at the right time of the year now. 9 out of 10, like I said. They had that loss last weekend to Mississippi State, but other than that, they've been rolling. Wins against Missouri, Tennessee, to be included with 2 wins over Auburn. So this is a tremendous ball club, and they finished second in the SEC this year when it was all said and done. But the convincing win this weekend, they give them my team of the week.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think we'll talk about Alabama later, but they really showed up. They brought it. They forced Alabama 7 of 36 from downtown. Their paint defense was really good. And you look at their roster and Julius Marble, Michigan State transfer, Dexter Dennis, Radford, Taylor, like you said, like you got some solid players in there, and they certainly got a little bit of the easier side of the SEC schedule, but they went 15-3. I mean, that's really good, and we won't do like an exclusive bracketology segment today, but we will go into how this team looks here and there. But 2 quadrant 4 losses in the non-conference, and they're set up to be in a pretty good spot. 6
Yeah.
seed, maybe even a 5, because they barreled through the SEC. Maybe not as good as we thought it would be, but a great end to a really solid season for Buzz Williams and their club. They didn't start off so great for him there, but he's a really good coach, I think, and that it'll be interesting to see where they end up in the tournament. If they get an 11 seed, that might be a really good game, but good for Texas A&M. So we're going to get into a couple of the topics here. We'll probably go through these pretty quickly because there's a lot of conference stuff we want to get into. But, Mike, as I was doing this list, a lot of things had to be mentioned, I think. First off, we'll start with some of the buzzer beaters. The theme from
Yeah.
last week coming back. There's a couple you can pick from, but take it away.
Yeah. I mean, this Houston versus Memphis game sure was a nail biter. Great game coming down the stretch, uh, down there at Memphis, and just a crazy buzzer beater at the end of the game for Houston to knock off the win. We almost had all top 3 teams lose this weekend, which that may have been a first as far as I know. Pretty incredible. But Houston, kudos to them. They found a way to win. They went through the American Conference schedule pretty unscathed, just that one loss to Temple, and made a pretty good case for why they might get the number 1 overall seed. I still think it's Kansas, but I mean, Sean, what an unbelievable game that was against Memphis.
Yeah, I actually was pretty impressed with Memphis, too. I watched
Yeah,
a pretty considerable amount of that game, and you know, Houston punched first, but they got their crowd into it, and I thought they really made Houston kind of change what they were doing, and you know, give Houston credit because they adjusted and they won, but I actually think Memphis probably was unlucky to lose that game. I
Yeah,
I do.
especially with how
I thought they
impressive they were in the second half.
I thought they
Yeah,
played much better in the second half, and Jamal Shed just kind of finding a hole and putting that thing up there and it goes in. But it'll
really.
be interesting. It'll be interesting to
Yeah,
see where Houston is because chances are they probably are going to win the American tournament. Maybe they get Memphis again. Maybe they lose, but I mean they have 2 losses, so I don't know if 2 or 3 losses, with a third being a neutral court loss to Memphis. If that happens, I don't know if that really affects their resume that much. I think the only way that they could really not, they're still going to be 1 seed even if they lose to whoever your pick is from the American. But it'll be interesting to see who the committee picks first because I think there's a case for all 3 of those teams that you mentioned. Even after the loss, Kansas has all the quad 1 wins. Alabama beat Houston on the road,
yeah,
and Houston has 2 losses and some of the best metrics across the board. They're won in almost everything. So there's cases for all 3 of them. I really don't know. Like I have an idea. Those numbers haven't changed much over the last couple weeks. I have an idea of what they're going to look like, but even like I don't even know what's going to separate them because at the end of the day, the committee's 12 people, 12 humans, and they're just going to be looking at these numbers and trying to pick. So it might mean a lot. It means if you're first or second, you get to have preference on what region you want. And there's a region. Kansas City is a region, so Kansas is going to want that. And you got a couple of other regions that Houston would really want. You could see Purdue maybe thrown in the East. It'll be really interesting. But yeah, I was impressed with Houston, but also pretty impressed with Memphis. They, like last year, they proved that they can kind of play with Houston, and I think they're going to want another shot at them. But
yeah. And the one concern I think I have for Houston right now is that time and time again, coming down the stretch, it seems like they're getting beat in the second half of games. It happened against Memphis. They had a pretty nice lead going into halftime, and Memphis really took it to them in the second half. Really, really impressed with them. Memphis did the same thing earlier this year. They were down by 11 on the road at halftime and made it a really good game against Houston coming down the stretch. So I am a little concerned for Houston. They also just the American is not a good conference this year. You know, you've got 2 good teams at the top with Memphis and Houston, and that's it really. I guess Tulane and Cincinnati are all right, but they're not making the tournament.
they're
They're probably
probably
not making the NIT.
yeah, they're not making the
So
NIT either. But yeah,
no, exactly. So um, we'll see how things pan out for Memphis. You wonder how much a win against Houston would bolster their seeding in the NCAA tournament because I think they're in right now.
oh yeah, and I would say that they're not really in a position where they can probably move their move move their seed that much with a lot
Depending on win against
unless
Houston.
unless
Yeah,
beating Houston. They got them
yeah,
twice last year, which was big. They went from a bubble
yeah.
team to a 9 seed, and they really fought. I think it was Gonzaga pretty close in that round of 32 game. But if it was up to me, no need to play an American Conference tournament. Just send Memphis and Houston to a place, and they can play for the third time. I really
I
hope.
agree.
I really hope that it comes down to that because they're the 2 best teams, and Memphis should get another shot at Houston. I think, and
Yeah,
Memphis
agreed.
probably going to find themselves in that 9, 10, 8 range again. But the next topic we'll go to here, Mike. You mentioned 2 of the top 3 teams lost. We already talked about Bama, Kansas losing at Texas. They had already clinched the Big 12 outright title. Is this anything to note for Kansas, or you think just a not much motivation in the regular season finale after you've already won the title on the road?
Minor bump in the road for Kansas, Sean. I mean, they already had clinched the outright Big 12 conference title, which for them to clinch it so convincingly with still a game to go, I thought was just so impressive. Which how dominant this conference was this year, and that every team had a chance to win on any given Saturday. And look, I understand that Kansas struggled earlier at times. They had that really head scratching loss to TCU at home where they got blown out um, at the Fog. We'd never really see that, but the way that Kansas played coming down the stretch, personally for me, they're the clear cut number one overall seed. Right now, the AP has them at 3. UCLA actually is coming in right now at number 2, which I don't think we expected to see that. But you look at how hot Kansas was coming into that game. I think they had won 7 straight, and some of those were very convincing wins. That win against Baylor, um, they had beat Texas, beat Oklahoma State on the road. So I feel good if I'm Kansas. I think they're going to get in that Kansas City region, which is all they really want to do in the first place. But basically, a home court advantage from there on.
Yeah, the Big 12 tournament is also in Kansas City, isn't it? Is it
Every year,
Lewis?
Sean. Don't get me started on why the Big 12 conference is in a state that doesn't have a Big 12 team, Missouri, but also where there's only 3 teams that are even near Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas, Kansas State, and Iowa State. Everybody else is in the Southwest, where I don't know, their headquarters is in Dallas, Texas. You'd think maybe they want to put it somewhere where all their Texas schools could get their fan bases to go to the game. I don't know, like American Airlines Center in Dallas, where an NBA team plays. But I don't know, Sean. That's beyond me. I don't make the rules.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a couple of these conferences really have, common sense. Like the
Yeah,
couple of these tournaments just being nowhere near where the teams play. And I get conferences now are very spread apart, and it's, if you're in the middle of
yeah.
some of these teams, then you're near nobody. So it's tough. They got to their basketball arenas. They got to negotiate with the professional teams that play there typically, and I know it's tough, but I think the Big 12. I know Big East is MSG, should stay that way, but I think a lot of the other conferences would benefit from sort of like a rotating cast, sort of like you see with some of the majors in golf. Like 5 or 6 venues go around. I do think the ACC does that. I know the Big Ten does, but yeah. Any
Big
thoughts
Ten,
on
for the
that?
most part, just goes back to Indianapolis and Chicago, which I think kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean they did
For the
MSG one
founding of the
year, they did
conference.
DC one
Yeah.
year, but yeah, that sort of thing. But yeah,
Um, But yeah, does the ACC still travel around? I know for a while they were going back to Greensboro, but
yeah,
they had gone up to Brooklyn to get some of their more East Coast market, which makes sense. They're just traveling down the East Coast, so I'm totally with that. But I mean, the Big 12 just staying in Kansas City for 15 years. I mean, come on, we can go to Fort Worth, we can go to Dallas, we can go to San Antonio, Austin, Tulsa, Oklahoma City. I don't know, you name it.
yeah.
Probably half a dozen venues that are better.
The ACC. I looked at it the other day. I think like half of the last 20 or half of the ACC tournaments have been in Greensboro, but they've also moved around a little bit. Like they went to
Yep.
Charlotte one year, they went to Charleston one year, they went to Brooklyn, they went to Washington D.C. So it's not like they're not trying to. I
Good
mean,
locations, I would
oh
add
yeah,
too. All of
and
those.
I don't think Greensboro is a bad one, but
No,
the ACC goes from Boston College to Miami, so that's in the middle.
yeah,
It's probably the most fair, and you got your 2 biggest programs within driving distance of Greensboro,
Duke and
so
UNC, yeah,
it makes sense. Big Ten, the next year the Big Ten is going to span coast to coast, so
it's gonna get tricky there.
yeah, I'm sure they'll kind of hit all the Midwest sites like they have. They were at Indy during the COVID year. They were Indy last year, Chicago this year. The women's tournament was in Minneapolis, so you got a lot of good options for the Big Ten schools, I think. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Big East tournament should stay in
Never
MSG.
gonna leave
No,
MSG, and
no,
it never will.
it shouldn't.
Never should, never will.
So the next
Yeah,
topic we'll go to here, Mike, is bubbles bursting on a couple of big programs. Obviously, the automatic bid is still possible, I guess. But we'll start with North Carolina first. They lose at home to Duke, and what a disappointing season for them. We don't have to say that again.
yeah.
Preseason #1. But any thoughts on that Duke Carolina game, and where do they go from here?
Yeah, I mean, for UNC, I think at this point they gotta at least make the semis, if not the finals of the ACC. I think it really does mean that they have to go to the finals. Um, I mean, in this game, I really expected UNC to be more physical, and they weren't. And kudos to Duke, who has really come back and really had a pretty solid year. I think we were dogging on Duke a lot, but winning their last 6 games was very impressive. They won every single home game they had this year. Definitely some concerning ones in the mix, but they won. They got it done when they needed to. And kudos on their 2 wins against North Carolina, gritty wins, but they got the job done.
Yeah, it felt like one that was going to hang in the balance, and UNC would just get it, like across the line, but they
Yeah.
didn't. I think they let the pressure get to them, and they still don't take good shots. They never have taken good shots,
Huh.
even last year when they were the best team in the
Nope.
country. But 9 out of 10 months, UNC's been a NIT team at best, and it looks like that's where they're headed, barring a pretty crazy run here. But um, we'll host. I'll actually holster UNC until we talk about the ACC tournament because their path might not be so favorable for them to get into the tournament. But another one was Michigan, Mike. 2 overtime losses since we last were on Wednesday. They lose a double overtime on Thursday to Illinois, up by 7 in overtime. Weren't able to get it, and then they lose in overtime at Assembly Hall to Indiana. That just really kind of exemplifies Michigan's season, doesn't it? So many close calls, and very, very rarely getting across the line.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, they just cannot get the job done when, it comes down to crunch time. And Michigan is a couple of tips here and there from probably being a top 25 team,
Oh yeah,
right? They've lost to Indiana twice
by
by a
1 and 2.
combined 3 points.
Yeah,
Yeah, combined 3 points. Double overtime loss to Illinois this past weekend. Um, I mean, where else do we want to go with this? They've
Kentucky
been
game was close. The North Carolina
yeah.
game was close.
Purdue was surprisingly really close. Uh,
That was when Purdue
Maryland
was rolling too.
6 point loss. Michigan State 6 point loss. I mean, this team, Central Michigan, they shouldn't have lost that game, but that was a
No,
2 point loss.
that was a
No excuses there.
3-pointer at
Anyways,
the end. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Kentucky, Virginia 2 point loss. I mean, it just goes on and on. But I think once again, this is a team that they're in the 8-9 game in the Big Ten tournament, so they're going to have to get by Rutgers, and then they're going to have to beat Purdue. I think if that's how I think it is. But I mean, it's going to take probably a championship run to get them into the big dance, which is a bummer because this is a good team. And I would say don't count them out because we have seen Michigan historically make runs through the Big Ten tournament to either get into the NCAA or get a higher seed. So you never know what's going to happen. But right now, sitting at 17 and 14, they got to get to 20 wins, in my opinion, to even be considered for the tournament.
Yeah, I think they need at least 2, and then it's going to have to come down to no bid stealers and maybe a couple other bubble teams lose. But
Yeah.
fun fact, Juwan Howard, since he became the coach at Michigan, nobody has won more Big Ten tournament games than Michigan.
Yeah.
So I think I have a lot more confidence in the Wolverines going on a run, especially because they drew a team that's playing really bad in the first round.
Yeah.
But
I think I would not be surprised if Michigan made a run.
But yeah, we'll throw the bracket up later, but I will take a quick stop in mid-major land here before we get into the conference tournaments. We've had a couple of automatic bids clinched already. Southeast Missouri, Fairleigh Dickinson, we'll talk about that later. Kennesaw State, North Carolina, Asheville, Drake, Furman, and Louisiana. Obviously, I think there's one of these teams, Mike, that's really going to be picked by a lot of people in the brackets, but obviously, congratulations to all of them to getting into the tournament. But Drake, Mike, is really gonna be a trendy upset pick, and there's a lot of reasons why.
Yeah, and you look at how they rolled through this conference tournament. They ended up splitting the regular season conference, but Bradley got the 1 seed based off of tiebreaker. Bradley beat them in the final game of the season to share that conference title. It's almost like they took that with a vengeance. Because they really rolled their way to the finals. And Sean, the championship game against Bradley was never even close.
No, I I watched it, part of it, and it was over, like just like
It was
that.
ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before it even started, it seemed they had a 20-point lead going into halftime. I think their lead swelled into the 40s. They eventually won by 26, and part of it was Bradley couldn't buy a bucket. So part of it was just a bad day on the end of the Braves. But Drake, I agree with you, Sean. They could be a trendy upset pick if you put them at a 12 and a 13 seed versus a week 4. I like their chances of making a run.
Yeah, they're probably going to be a 12 because they're 65th in Ken Palm. That's
Yeah.
3 spots above Pittsburgh and above a couple teams on the bubble, and really only behind Oral Roberts as the automatic qualifiers. So they're 45th in defense, so they can guard. And Tucker DeVries is a really good player. So
Yeah.
Drake gonna gotta watch out for the Bulldogs. They I believe they were an at-large 2 years ago. They were thrown into the first 4,
Yes.
but last year they lost in Arch. No, that's not Arch Madness.
Yeah.
You know,
March
yes,
Madness.
It is Arch
March
Madness.
Madness, baby.
So yeah,
MVC.
they were really good. I think Bradley's a pretty good team too, and they just destroyed them there. So
Yeah.
yeah, Bradley watch or not Bradley, they lost. Drake, watch out for them. So the last topic here that we have to get into from your Big 12, Mike, Mark Adams has been suspended as the Texas Tech coach. Couple bad things coming out of the air. Used a master and servant scripture reading to one of his players and allegedly spit on that player before he has denied it. Tough situation here in Lubbock.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would be surprised if he doesn't get fired.
Very concerning. Boosters were already having grumblings about Mark Adams before this incident happened. Um, and this is not a good look for the program. It's not a good look for him. This is a guy that's been in Lubbock for 20 plus years. He's been a longtime assistant at Texas Tech, was there with Bobby Knight, was there with Chris Beard. And the Texas Tech faithful had really been prompting him as being a significant upgrade from Chris Beard. And then this year, they did not play well. These, you know, they're not even allegations at this point. They happened. It was fact. Really not a good look for him. And who knows? We might see him get one more chance. I'll say this: I think if Mark Adams didn't have a bad year, Texas Tech probably would have swept it under the rug, given him a fine, and called it good. But coupled with a bad season, it might be time for him to get out of Lubbock.
Yeah, I think it's just the combination of things, right? We saw McDermott do a similar thing, and he
Yeah,
got a 1 game suspension, and he apologized, and it seemed like that was all right. But a couple things add up. It's not doing so well. Nobody has come to his defense. Nobody.
no,
And yeah, not a good situation. They got life a little bit there at the end, but then they lost at home to TCU, and now they're probably not gonna even accept an NIT bid. Going into the Big 12 tournament, that's gonna be tough playing without your coach. But
yeah,
we'll get into the conference teams and the bracket. Mike and I each took a couple conferences here instead of kind of doing both and comparing them. But we will go in alphabetical order. We'll go to the ACC first. Let's hope that I can do this right. Okay. So we'll start with the teams and then we'll do the bracket. Our big, or not big, our ACC Coach of the Year, Jeff Capel from Pitt, Larinaga, close second, I think, from Miami. These are the 2 options, I think, for me. A couple other people deserve some credit, but Capel was, people are saying that he was a lame duck coach, and he is more than likely going to take his team to the NCAA tournament. Really, really impressive from Capel and Pitt.
yeah. I mean, what a season! We did not expect anything out of Pitt this year. They did have a little bit easier of a schedule in the ACC, but really kudos to them. They showed up coming down the stretch, and they were very competitive. And Sean, I think we even kind of dismissed Pitt as being a legitimate contender for the ACC title, and they ended up splitting a share of the championship regular season with Miami. So incredibly impressive year for Jeff Capel, and he's definitely going to be around for a couple more years at the helm at Pitt.
Yeah, so up there, my first and second team, I would say the first four there on the first team, very easy. Baycott, Filipowski, Terquavion Smith, and Tyree Appleby. But other than that, there was a lot of kind of solid players. I put Jamarius Burton on there from Pitt. Figured that Pitt should have a representative. I don't think any of those are really all that controversial. We'll see what happens. Or do they might be the conference that does 10 first teamers, but we'll
SEC
see.
does 10. Yeah.
SEC does 10, so we'll see who gets it from the ACC. We picked Baycott for Player of the Year last year, but they ended up going with Williams from Wake. There isn't a clear-cut option for Player of the Year in this conference, Mike. Who's your pick?
I mean, Sean, you could even go with, guys like Nigel Pack in the second team. Flipowski, I don't think he's a player of the year caliber
I don't
guy.
think
Good
so either.
player. I, I mean, is it Baycott by default? I don't know, Sean. I think it probably is, but this is a pretty weak conference.
I think what I kind of did is I kind of took the best players from the better teams in the ACC and put them there.
Teams, yeah.
Second team was Hunter Tyson, Pack, Wong, Jesse Edwards from Syracuse, double machine, and Blake Hinson from Pitt. Um, the U guards really didn't have the stats, I think, to make the first team, but one eye test. I mean, there's just so many of them, right? You got Miller, too. It is an individual award, unfortunately for them, which is why I put them on the second team. But I could see them getting first team. But Filipowski consistently pretty solid for Duke, but not like lottery pick like you would think the player of the year of this conference would be. So I really don't know. And Appleby probably had the most impressive individual season, but they're not in the NCAA tournament. And it's not like they're on the doorstep like Wake was last year. They're NIT hopefuls, but I really don't know who to pick here, and I don't think that that there is a obvious pick. They'll probably be pretty. There won't be unanimous. The writers that get picked to choose the award will probably be all over the place, and it'll probably end up being one of those four. But I mean, Smith was injured for part of the year. NC State wasn't great. They've fallen off, so. There isn't a whole lot to pick from in the ACC, to be honest, and that's why people think it might be a down year. Virginia's players, I know they got a share, but none of those players. I mean, Gardner maybe was second team, but I decided to go with Edwards instead. But just talking through it here, there's not a whole lot of options in the ACC. We'll turn it to the bracket here. Just a little bit of a look here at this. I think Carolina, talked about it earlier, I don't think that the draw was very good for them because you got Duke and Miami on the top, and they probably need to beat one of those teams to make it. They're going to play BC or Louisville on Wednesday, and then assuming they win that, they'll play Virginia, who they've already beat. So does the second win against them really make it that much better than a first? And then if they win that, then they'll get NC State or Clemson, who are one's a bubble team, the other one's not in the field. So I think they have to. They're not going to get a good opportunity for a win until the championship game, and then I think they're going to have to win it. I do. But you see the game times there. Hopefully it's big enough. We got 3 games tomorrow, 2, 4:30, and 7. None of those teams will be going to the dance, barring a 5 wins in 5 days stretch. But ACC tournament, definitely one that I'm looking more forward to the other ones, I'll say. But chances are the Final Four or the championship game could be pretty cool here. I really hope Duke gets Miami, because Duke's playing really well right now, and they did get them barely at Cameron. And then the bottom of the bracket, somebody's got to win those games. Virginia's been playing poor. Clemson is not an NCAA tournament team right now. NC State's on the bubble, so a couple opportunities there. Might not be the most interesting, though. And Mike, we switched up the order here. We're going to the Big 12. So
real quick, Sean, can I give you
go ahead.
a little bit of a potential upset Cinderella story in the ACC? They're currently the 14th seed in the ACC tournament, but they've been playing really good basketball this year, Sean, and they've lost, I think, 12 of their 17 losses in conference by single digits. Uh, Sean, look out for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It is
Uh,
Mike Bray's last run as Notre Dame head coach. I think he's got a pretty winnable game against Virginia Tech in the first round. He's got NC State in the second. And then if they win that, he's got Clemson in the third round. And I don't think Clemson's that good.
no, they're not in the
So,
NCAA tournament right now,
no.
so there's a path.
So I like Notre Dame to make a semifinal run, pencil it in,
Yeah.
put it in your brackets. It's going to happen.
Yeah, we'll go through our picks to win each conference later this week, but I think the winner will 100% be from the top part of this bracket. I think it's just how the draw shook out, and with a couple of not a balanced schedule, which you can get in conferences like this. Sometimes you get teams seated higher than how good they actually are. But Mike, we'll go to the Big 12 now, and you can talk through your first and second team.
Thanks, Sean. So for my first team, all Big 12, I've got Jalen Wilson leading the top. He's also my player of the year, spoiler alert. I then got Keontae Johnson, comeback player of maybe the history of the NCAA.
Yeah, I was going to say
right
ever.
there. Literally died on the court a couple of years ago when he was playing for Florida. Thought he would never play basketball again. 2 years later, he's suiting up again and is one of the top players in the country. He's probably going to be drafted next in April at the NBA draft. I then have Adam Flagler from Baylor, really good guard, really kind of incredible meteoric rise from lowly Presbyterian all the way to being one of the elite guards in college basketball. Then I've got Marquise Noel at the point. Just been an incredible year, just an assist maker for Kansas State. Really been one of the Jetsons of that offense. And finally, I got the guy that cannot be replaced at TCU, and that's Mike Miles Jr. He's been incredible this year for TCU. They've played like way, way better with him on the court, and that's why he's in my first team. I don't think he was picked by the coaches or the voters to be first team, but his impact on that TCU team, Sean, is just you can't put it on a stat sheet.
No, they're frankly not a very good team without him.
Yeah.
And they lost their first game of the year to Northwestern State without him, and they really lost control in the Big 12 when he was out. And then as soon as he comes back, they win. They at least start playing better. I know they lost a couple in there too, but yeah, he might be the most valuable player in the Big 12 if you think about it, to their team.
To their team? Oh,
yeah. But yeah,
absolutely.
And you got Tangang as Coach of the Year. What about, or we'll Holster National Coach of the Year for next time, but easiest choice probably in any conference, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, well, I say that, Sean, but the Big 12 has three coaches that I think are National Coach of the Year finalists. And that's Bill Self, who had a completely different change of roster from his national championship team last year. A lot of offseason turmoil, was suspended for the start of the season. I think they only had one returning starter from a year ago, yet they come back and they're probably, in my book, they're the number one overall seed. We'll see if that ends up happening come Sunday, but they've been incredible this year, and they've dominated the most elite conference that we've seen in at least over a decade. So he's been incredible. Also want to give out a shout out to Rodney Terry, who took over a Texas program that was really struggling after Coach Beard was fired early on in the season. And he's taken them to be the best Longhorns team we've seen since the 2007-2008 season when they made the Elite Eight. But I think at the end of the day, it's got to be Coach Jerome Tang, who had 2 scholarship players on his roster when he started at Kansas State. They all left. They all jumped ship. He had to build his team from scratch, took risks on guys like Keontae Johnson, which ended up being a tremendous success for him. But Sean, this team was preseason ranked 9th in the Big 12. Or actually, no, they were ranked 10th. And I think a lot of people that weren't familiar with Coach Tang, a.k.a. most people that weren't Baylor guys like myself, thought, he had low expectations. But guys that knew Coach Tang knew that he was going to take this program to be an NCAA tournament team. I don't think anybody expected K-State to be this good, though. So for me, he's definitely the clear-cut Coach of the Year in the Big 12.
Yeah, and you've got a couple second-teamers there that were pretty good. I probably would have had Marcus Carr in the first team, but
Mhm.
he's really took it to another level. He always had his
Yes.
stats at Minnesota, right? But I think now he's really playing winning basketball more at Texas,
Yeah.
and then you could take it through the rest. But a lot of solid players in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So second team at the top, I have Marcus Carr. He's been incredible this year um, with Texas. Keontae George with Baylor, the freshman phenom. He's probably going to be a lottery pick this year in the draft. He's had a couple of tough games, a couple games down the stretch where he did not score the basketball very well. But I think what makes him so elite is when he can't score the ball, he's still a tremendous asset to his team. I remember watching a game earlier this year. He only had 4 points. This was a couple weeks ago, but he ended up having 9 rebounds and 8 assists. And his ability to still be proactive on the court when he can't score, that is the mark of a great player. Um, and then I've got Kevin McCullough Jr. at Kansas. The stat sheet, it doesn't really say a lot for Kevin McCullough Jr. It doesn't. But his ability to impact Kansas when without the ball is just, it's incredible. And that's why he's on my second team. And then I've got LJ Cryer with Baylor, one of the star guards for that front court, and then Gabe Kalsher with Iowa State.
Yep. So I'll ask you this: who do you think? I don't know if it been announced already. Defensive Player of the Year,
I'm not sure if it has.
because
There's a couple of
that might
a
not be
really
such an easy one because there's not like such an elite shot blocker in the Big 12 that I can think of. So it might be a. Hey, could it be Harris? Could it be McCullough?
I think it's going to end up being Harris, Sean. He was a lockdown defender up at the guard position. No shot blockers this year. Tama Chachu only played a couple games at the end of the year, so I think it's got to be Harris.
So we'll take a quick look at the Big 12. Nope, that's the Big 10 bracket. Hold on. Big 12 bracket. Here we go. Okay. There's the Big 12 bracket. We start on Wednesday from Mike's favorite, the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City, Missouri. We got a couple of games Tuesday or Wednesday that matter. Oklahoma State absolutely needs to win Bedlam round 3 against Oklahoma to be in the NCAA tournament. They're probably on the outside looking in right now, and that might happen while or before we talk next. So they got to win that. You look at
Yeah,
Baylor playing Iowa State. This has got the
don't love that
potential.
matchup.
This has got the potential to be a really good tournament. We got both the purple teams playing, Kansas State and TCU. We got West Virginia playing Texas Tech. Bob Huggins is probably going to the NCAA tournament. Maybe he calls it quits after this year. A little bit of a rumor there, but we'll get into predictions next time, Mike. But anything you want to add on the bracket or anything that'll
Yeah,
come up in the Big 12 tournament?
the Big 12 bracket's probably the most straightforward because it's 10 teams. It's the top 10 teams in the conference. Um, those There is really a clear top 6 teams and then 7 through 10. So it really works out this year where there wasn't really any question about who was going to play in those first 4 games. Um, but with that being said, I think Kansas is going to take the crown in this. We'll talk about it later, obviously, but they're the best team in the conference and they've proved it.
Yeah, the question for me is does Kansas really want to win or need to win? I know Bill Self will say it and he'll get on his players, but like, do they
Yeah.
need to win? And I guess that's the negative of these tournaments is that kind of everybody's kind of looking forward to the NCAA tournament if you're not a bubble team. So does it really matter for them? And I'm sure he'll get good efforts, but they're not such a deep team either. And with their number one seed already locked up, I would think at least in that first game against West Virginia or Tech, I think maybe you don't play any guys 40 minutes. You play a couple 35. So maybe the motivations isn't there, and when that happens, you can get some crazy results.
Yeah,
But
I would say though, Sean, that Kansas hasn't needed it
yeah,
in
yeah.
many years, and they've still dominated that tournament ever since it's been moved to Kansas City. I think they've won they moved there in 2010, Sean, and Kansas has won 5 of those years. So.
pretty good percentage.
The results speak for themselves, in my opinion. And oddly enough, the team that does almost as well as Kansas is Iowa State. So clearly a regional home crowd advantage for those teams. But I think Kansas is still going to be ready to take down the competition.
We got Iowa State, who just beat Baylor
Yeah, they're
last
looking.
weekend at their
That,
place.
that was a shocking game,
Yeah.
Sean. I would say we talked about. I think the word I used was Iowa State has been insufferable on the road, and then they had a really bad loss at the beginning of the week. And it's almost like after their off the court news, Coach Osselberger had his team inspired. They were ready to play, and Baylor just looked like they gave up with 10 minutes to go in this game and kind of threw their hands in the air and said, "We can't do it." One of the most embarrassing performances I think I'd ever seen on a senior night for a team in Baylor. Obviously, I'm a Baylor fan, so I was pretty upset about that. But Iowa State looks to be rejuvenated heading into the tournament.
Yeah, like I don't think Iowa State really relies on talent as much as other teams.
Yeah,
So it's all about effort and buying in and all that coach talk. And maybe throwing Caleb Grill off the team got everybody's attention again. It's amazing how that works and
yeah,
how these are college kids, younger than you, most of them younger than me.
scary. Yeah,
And at the end of the day, sometimes you just need to get them believing in something, and who knows what's going to happen. But I do think Baylor likes that they have another shot at them so quickly, because that wasn't Baylor, and you can give
it
Iowa
wasn't.
State credit, but if Baylor wants to be cutting down the nets at the end of the year, which they certainly could, they got to do better than that. But we'll go into win streaks here. Sign up for it in the App Store. 2 weeks are down. A lot of people have been winning prizes. It's a free to play sports prediction game. Weekly cash prizes. Use code CBB Daily, all capital letters, and then join the Sports Daily group. If it gets big enough, there might be a separate prize pool just for the Sports Daily group. You must be 18 or older to play. You could win up to $3,000 per week. It's a whole lot of fun. Told Mike before the show I picked South Alabama today, and they lost They had a three at the end of the game that rimmed out. It was really close, but disappointed there. But some of my other picks were doing pretty well. We'll go into the Big East now. Big East logo. Where you? All right, here we go. So my coach of the year in the Big East, I think it goes without saying. He's right up there with Tang, I think, for coach of the year. That's Shaka Smart for Marquette. I predicted them to finish 10th. I think coaches were 9th. Marquette in the Big East. I think it goes without saying they won that conference by 2 games after it was pretty much a dogfight all year. And Marquette's going to be the highest ranked seeded in the Big East. They're the highest ranked team in the AP poll. Can't say enough good things about the Golden Eagles. And then that first team, easiest first team for me to do by far. Those 5 players had exceptional years. My player of the year is Tyler Kolek, who's first. Kind of just runs the show for Shaka. Assists. He's a big guard. He can shoot it. He can get to the hoop. He can play defense. None of the other players really separated. They're all good. They're all great players. Kalkbrenner, defensive player of the year for me, and he won it anyway. But Big East first team, 5 solid players on the 5 best teams in the conference. I think it's pretty straightforward, Mike. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean the Big East was pretty clear cut. I think this year, coach of the year all the way down. I think this is Sean. We're going to get into how interesting this tournament could be. There's always fireworks at the Garden in New York City, but I think from top to bottom, this is pretty easily explanatory if you watch the Big East this year.
So, yep, Hopkins probably had the player of the year until Providence kind of fell off recently. He had a couple bad games, but
Yeah,
all 5 of those players are capable and pretty willing to take over the game, and they've all done it multiple times this year. Second team, not really. I think Sonogo and Jones were easily the 6th and the 7th best players. They probably could have been in the first team. I think Sonogo was, if I'm not mistaken. And then Sean Miller was my second team coach. I know they were predicted second, but in your first year, with the program to do what he did is very impressive. They're scoring. One of their best players got injured. They weren't deep to begin with, and they figured out how to play without him. They might be better without Zach Fremantle. But Eric Dixon from Nova, Primo Spears from Georgetown, and Oso Iguodaro from Marquette fill out my second team. Spears had a really good year stats-wise. Georgetown, horrible year otherwise. But Dixon really got it going for Nova there while they had kind of things were going there. And Iguodaro, big man for Marquette, really just gets the job done. Second team was a little tougher for me to fill out because there's a lot of solid players in the Big East. But for me, this was the clear-cut first team. And you could probably make an argument for any of those first-team players to be Player of the Year. But we'll go to the Big East bracket right now. I think Wednesday might not be that interesting because all six of those teams in action are going to be are not going to be going to the NCAA tournament, barring a automatic bid. But once we get to Thursday, I think this is going to be the most competitive and the coolest tournament across the board, and it's always so great that it's at MSG too.
I mean, the biggest tournament's always special, Sean. And this year you look at who can make a run at it. We talked about it for weeks about Villanova making a run, and the scene is setting for them. Opening game against Georgetown. I think we all hope that'll be Patrick Ewing's last game as a head coach at Georgetown. Great legendary player for the program, great NBA player, but 2 conference wins in 2 seasons. His last 2 seasons at Georgetown is pretty horrible, especially with the resources they have being in DC. But if Villanova wins that game over Georgetown, they've got Creighton, and I think that's a green light game for them. They beat Creighton a couple weeks ago.
They killed them too. They really got after them.
Yeah, and they've been playing outstanding basketball in the last few weeks. So I think watch out for Villanova potentially being a bid stealer, Sean. The scene is set for them.
They've already beaten all the teams that they're going to have to, or at least get to the final. They beat Creighton. They won at Xavier. So the path is there for Villanova. I know they got beat pretty good by UConn, but I think UConn's playing pretty well right now. I think they might crush Providence in that 4-5 matchup.
Yeah.
I think that could get ugly, especially because UConn fans, really, and Providence fans too, simple train ride down to the Garden for the day. That's a 2:30 game on Thursday. That's going to be about as rowdy as it gets for a 2:30 game, but Marquette,
absolutely.
I think it's going to be really cool. The thing that stinks about it is that all these tournaments are kind of on at the same time, so you can only watch one of them at once unless you wheel a couple extra TVs in or get the computer out and the TV out, which I'll definitely.
That's what I'll be doing.
Yeah, that's what most college basketball fans will be doing. But Big East tournament has a chance to be really, really cool. We'll go to the Big Ten next, just for a minute, where we will be. That's the Big 12. Big Ten, just for a minute. We'll go over our teams. Special edition of Big Ten Report tomorrow, early afternoon-ish. We might try it live. Mike might make a special appearance. Off the bat, Mike, I think I'll get your take on this just in case you can't make it tomorrow, but what a crazy final day of the Big Ten.
Oh, my goodness.
Indiana, with a loss, would have been in the 8-9 game. They won. They're at the 3. Would have been the opposite for Michigan.
Yeah.
And then Northwestern at Rutgers either would have been the 2 or the 9, depending on what happened in that game. They won, so they're the 2 seed. But what a crazy finish to the year for the Big Ten. And with Purdue really playing poorly the last couple weeks, this is really, it's anyone's game.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, what an unbelievable finish to the conference. Also, Rutgers, they ended up in the 9 seed. I believe they could have been one of the top couple seeds in this. And that game really killed them because they've really been struggling coming down the stretch. I mean, this has really been a thrilling tournament or thrilling season in the Big Ten. Despite, it seems like everybody's just incredibly above mediocre. They're going to get a ton of teams in the tournament. They're not going to get great seeds. But one game that I am interested in is Illinois versus Penn State. Illinois has struggled versus Penn State all season, and they're going to get one final crack at them as the home team playing in front of a home crowd of fans in Chicago. So I like them. And if Illinois can win that game, it's going to set up a Northwestern versus Chicago state championship for Illinois college basketball right there to have a chance to play in the semifinals. So I think look out for Illinois to make a run as a 17 into the semifinals and maybe even the championship game. Um, they put up a really valiant comeback against Purdue, tied the game up coming down the stretch, and that was with them being down 21 at halftime at Mackey Arena against Purdue. So I think Illinois, they've got all their players healthy now. They have a chance to make a run through the tournament.
I think everybody has a chance. You got a Nebraska team that just won at Carver Hawkeye Arena against
I was
Iowa,
about to say that, yeah.
and they're still playing for their NIT. You know, they Hummel talked about it on the podcast, not on the podcast, on the game Nebraska Iowa. He's like, Nebraska, you know, making the NIT for them would mean so much more than probably any other power conference team, especially where they're at.
Yeah.
And they get Minnesota as easy as it gets in the Big Ten. If they win that, I think they'll be in the NIT, and they get a Maryland team that they've beaten. So, don't rule Nebraska out. I think Penn State, Illinois, you see this a lot where teams sweep other teams, and there's two ways that happens, I think. Number one, you're just better, and you game plan better, and you are just a better team. You have the other team's number. Easy third win. Or there's one where you play two really close games, and it could go either way, and the one team happened to win the two games, and maybe they're not better, and maybe that team wants another shot. But anybody could win this, and I don't think I can't imagine what the odds are of somebody winning because everybody has like no chance. Somebody does have to win it. But I'm happy Indiana's not playing at noon on Thursday for the first time in like 5 years, which is nice. But it'll be really cool. We'll do our conference teams and coach of the year tomorrow. But I have a feeling that one's pretty straightforward, to be honest. So last conference here before we talk about... or that might be it. But last conference here, SEC, Mike. Might have been a down year for the SEC, but a couple of good teams that weren't supposed to be very good, but you could take it away.
Yes, Sean. So first off, I'll start off with the coach of the year in the SEC. And for me, it's pretty clear that it's got to be Buzz Williams. We talked about A&M at the start of the podcast, how incredible his turnaround has been in the conference season, despite having a pretty terrible out-of-conference schedule. We talked about a few quad four losses, excuse me. Really, really hurt them. But they've really taken charge down the stretch, and really kudos to him. This is the third program that he's turned around. He did it at Marquette. He did it at Virginia Tech, and we thought was building a powerhouse at Virginia Tech before he took the money and ran down to College Station, Texas. But kudos to him and what he's done at A&M to have a good competitive basketball team that A&M has not had in a long time. So without further ado, my first team in the SEC, Oscar Tshiebwe at the top. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Defending National Player of the Year. He's been really good this year despite a pretty down year for Kentucky. Playing a lot better than coming down the stretch, Sean, I got to say. Brandon Miller, Freshman Player of the Year in the SEC. He's probably going to be in the running for Player of the Year in the SEC. I don't know if they've come out with those final conclusions, but he's been playing through a lot of controversy lately, and he's still been kind of keeping his head high. So kudos to him. Kobe Brown at Missouri, he's also there. Wade Taylor the fourth, and then Colin Castellon at Florida. Those round out my first team, Sean, all SEC.
So, for you, does it come down to Brandon Miller or Tshiebwe for Conference Player of the Year?
It does, and I hate to say it, but I think in part because of all the news going on, I think Tshiebwe is going to end up winning it.
Yeah, Miller wasn't on the top 15 Naismith award list, and I think that's pretty ridiculous. But
I agree.
They chose to do that.
I think he absolutely has the ability to be one of the better players, but I think at the end of the day, Tshiebwe is a better player. he is the one thing that keeps Kentucky from being a NIT bubble team, if we're being honest this year. He's been really good for them. So I still think Shigwe is, but Brandon Miller is not getting the respect he deserves.
No,
And I think it's unfortunate because of what's going on.
I think he has the chance to really take over the tournament and
Yeah,
easily be one of those people that you talk about for a while. But take
absolutely.
it away with your second team, Mike. I just think the second team is a lot of players who are good but are really inconsistent, and this could have probably been a list of 20 players. The second team.
Yeah, there are so many players that you could throw in here, starting with the coach Dennis Gates at Missouri. What a job that he's done to make them competitive, much less a NCAA tournament team that they are. Nobody had any expectations for Missouri coming into the season. He's coming in as a first-year head coach, just like Coach Jerome Tang over at Kansas State, and completely turned around a team. And I think there were a lot of people that were skeptical about this hire because this is a guy that really didn't have he had limited success at Cleveland State, was only a head coach there for 3 years. They won a pair of regular season championships, but only had one appearance in the NCAA and had zero postseason victories. So
I've got the Vikings on right now in the Horizon League semis. They're putting it on Milwaukee. They look like they're going to have a chance
Sean,
to go
it's the
back to the NCAA
Hercules
tournament.
Tires
Oh,
Horizon.
is it another Hercules Tires?
I think so. Oh no, it's Barbasol. I'm sorry,
Barbasol. You're right.
even better. Shout out to Barbasol Shaving Cream.
At the wonderful Indiana
Gillette.
Farmers Coliseum, the home of the IUPUI Jaguars. But yeah, go Cleveland State. But yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah. But anyways, not to get too off track, Sean. Now, if I had to go with my second team, I'm going to start with Antonio Reeves at Kentucky. He's had a pretty solid year.
Great game against Arkansas.
37 points. I mean, just unbelievable performance in that one. Ricky Council the fourth over at Arkansas. He had a really great season. He looked really solid coming down the stretch and really was the best player on Arkansas all year. Kind of a disappointing season for them, but they ended up getting the win.
He's kind of the only.
They're going to get to the.
Yeah, he's kind of the only starter that really played the entire year for them, and he was pretty solid.
Yeah.
But Arkansas is a team that will probably be underseeded. I could see them. They're the 10 seed.
I could see it.
They're the 10 seed. We'll talk about the bracket later, but they can make some things happen.
And I think they can make a run in the SEC. They are a good team, and she seems like they've played under their expectations this year.
For sure.
So, keeping on going. KJ Williams, Johnny of LSU. I think he's had a really good year despite a pretty disappointing season for LSU. They had no expectations going into the year. Played well in the out-of-conference season, but really fell flat on their faces in the SEC regular season conference season. So we'll see what they can do in the tournament. Johnny Broome from Auburn, he was one of their top players. I think only really him and Wendell Green Jr. were the really players that carried Auburn this year and the reasons that they'll be playing in March Madness this year. And then finally, Tulo Smith out of Mississippi State. They're going to be playing in the tournament this year, likely. They've had a surprisingly good season, kind of the opposite, though, of A&M, where they had an incredible out-of-conference schedule. They were undefeated for the longest time. They were the last team to be undefeated, but then did not play well in the conference. But Tulo Smith, great year for them, and really carried Mississippi State.
So we'll throw the tournament bracket up here for a second. At Arkansas Auburn game at 7:10 is really interesting. Auburn probably safe in the tournament with that win against Tennessee. Right? Tennessee on the weekend. Arkansas is the 10 seed. They're probably still safe in the tournament, but the bottom certainly drops out in the SEC, but there's a chance that this could be a really good tournament. Kentucky's playing pretty well. They're probably going to want another shot at Vanderbilt, who beat them on their home floor on senior night.
Yeah.
A couple good storylines here. You got Alabama playing, certainly not at the level that they were before, but they're still winning most of the time. I know they got beaten at Texas A&M, but they were right there at the end. You got Missouri, who Tennessee's going to want another shot at Missouri after Missouri beat them on their home floor. So there's a lot of cool storylines here. There's a lot of you could see the game times 1 and 3 rather than kind of 12 and 2:30. So maybe you could catch a little in between action in the SEC tournament.
Yeah.
But my takeaway here is the early days Wednesday, Thursday might not be all that interesting. Maybe Arkansas, Auburn on Thursday, but a chance for this one for teams to really be playing well down or going into the tournament. There could be some really good games here.
Yeah.
And
And I
somebody's got to
think
win. A lot of teams are going to feel like they have a chance.
absolutely, Sean. And if I had to give you a couple of dark horses, I think one is going to be Arkansas. They're rated the 10 seed, but I think talent wise, they probably are one of the better teams in the SEC.
For sure.
Um,
Everybody's back, so
yeah,
yeah.
everybody's back,
They
and
could easily win 2 games. Easily.
I love their chances to beat Auburn, and I've been singing the praises of A&M. I think Arkansas is going to have a good chance to knock them off.
They might be favored in that game actually, especially if they put up a good performance against Auburn. But you don't see
Totally,
that very often.
no, you really don't. A 10 seed playing pretty darn close to even against a 2 seed. Um, but another team that I like to watch out for is Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's played tremendous coming down the stretch in the season. We've talked about their buzzer beater win over Tennessee at home. We talked about them playing really well and dominating Kentucky on their senior night. And then they beat Mississippi State. So I think they've now won 4 to 5 games because they also beat Auburn in that stretch. They beat Florida twice. This is a team where you almost wonder if the season had been extended another month, if they would have found their way into the NCAA tournament. Probably won't get in at this point, barring an automatic bid. But I like their chances to pick off a game against Kentucky, and then you never know how things can go in this tournament. If they'll have a chance to beat A&M in the semis and reach a championship game, that could get them into the tournament.
Yeah, I think Jerry Stackhouse. People keep saying how good of a coach he is, and I think you can start to see it.
Yeah,
Their progression has been slow under him, but they're getting better. And they had a tough non-conference. They lost to Memphis, Southern Miss, St. Mary's. Southern Miss won their conference, and Memphis and St. Mary's are tournament teams. They lost to VCU, who's the best team in the Atlantic 10. They did lose to Grambling State at home, but all these, there were a lot of non-conference losses, but they are against good teams. NC State on a neutral. So if that had gone a little better, they were 11-7 in the SEC. They probably could have made it, but they're 18-13.
yeah,
They're probably in that 8-12 range of out right now. So there's just too many things that would have to happen, and not enough time left. So they probably have to grab the auto bid. But positive direction for Vanderbilt. I think NIT certainly in play, and I think they're one of the teams that will kind of I don't know how to
yeah,
say it, like actually want to be at the NIT. And that's
absolutely.
why you see 6 seeds and 4 seeds win the NIT all the time, because the teams that just miss out had been playing all year on the bubble. They knew they were on the bubble, and it's a letdown for them not to be in the tournament, and they still have to play. And that's why you see teams like Vanderbilt win the NIT, because
And
it
last year,
happens.
Vanderbilt was a 4 seed in the NIT. They got it all the way to the quarters, and they lost on a last second play to Xavier in front of a packed crowd at Cintas Center. So
I believe Xavier won the entire thing too, right?
they did,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, they
without
did.
a coach, which is interesting. But yeah,
Pretty impressive,
but
yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, no, Xavier absolutely, or not Xavier, excuse me, Vanderbilt. I think look out for them in the SEC tournament.
yeah. Before the year, Jerry Stackhouse was voted by all the coaches in the SEC anonymously that he was the best X's and O's coach in the conference, which, Calipari, not known for X's and O's. And then if you look at it, I would say maybe Musselman would be the other one that I would say deserves that.
Yeah,
But it makes sense why the coaches, obviously a great NBA career, but coaches respect him, and there's no reason why Vanderbilt can't progress this thing in the next couple of years. But I'm just looking at this now. Didn't put this on the script, Mike, but Ole Miss reportedly is interested in Chris Beard. But that's something something that we can talk about after the season in more of our long-term things. But now, short-term, 2 more tournaments, the conference tournaments, then the big dance. And And that's a good transition into our final segment, which is usually the pick segment. During the regular season, Mike was right 58% of the time. That was better than my 54. So Mike wins the regular season title, unfortunately. But we are going to have another contest in the playoffs, postseason. So we'll see what happens there. We might create some graphics for these conference tournaments, but then we'll definitely go very in-depth with our point system when the bracket comes out, 10 points for each matchup, and we can pick how many points we want to put on each team. I thought that was good last year, how confident we were in picks, but still able to get some if we put some stock into the other team. But that's all we have for you tonight. Thanks for tuning in to the Sports Daily CBB podcast. We'll see you tomorrow for a special edition of the Big Ten Report, and then we might do a couple more shows, but we'll definitely see you right after the bracket gets released on Selection Sunday. We have a couple of new people that we are expecting to come on, so be sure to check out all the content. It's the best time of the year for college basketball fans. We'll see you next time.